Dr. Tewarie to the stage.
Thank you very much, Kevan. My brothers and sisters at the head table, I don't know how easy it is to follow Rodney after that scintillating performance. Give him a round of applause. Now, this is a place I know well. You may not know this, but I used to live right here next to the Eccles family on that same street. And as you know, I spent a lot of time at the University of the West Indies. You would know me as principal, but I mean, I lectured there for many years. And you would also know that at the IOB, we moved it from Port of Spain to Paget Road at the bottom of Paget Road at Churchill Roosevelt Highway. And my family comes from Kirep on the corner of Knoll Street. And they're still there. My mother and father are gone, but my brother lives there. And for most of my life as a young man, I played football on the Knoll Street recreation ground. So this place is pretty sacred to me. It is a place that I know, it's a place that I've lived. It's a place that I've contributed to and helped develop, and it's a place that developed me. So it's very valuable. So when I talk to you and I say brothers and sisters, I really mean that. Last night, the Rowley PNM had a meeting in San Fernando. Junior Regrello said that he was the best thing since sliced bread and that everything was good in San Fernando. They had money to spend and everybody was being looked after. I want to ask you if you believe that. Ask the businessman in High Street in San Fernando if they believe that. Ask the members of the San Fernando Chamber, which was formed a couple years ago, if they believe that. Ask the citizens of the city of San Fernando, a place where the middle class is dwindling, where workers are entering poverty and joblessness. Ask the ex-employees of Petrotrin whether Junior Regrello's view of how great he has made San Fernando is in fact true. Camille Robinson Regis spoke of many sins of the People's Partnership, but no one in the People's Partnership or the UNC ever went to a bank with a bag of money that could not be explained. And any one of you in the audience, can you tell me one thing that Camille Robinson Regis did in 4 years that have passed as Minister of Planning and Development? What plans has she put forward? What development has taken place? What difference has it made to people, to community, or to nation? What difference has she made as a minister? And we had Randall Mitchell. I won't say much about Randall because he's a young man in the politics. But before he took over the tourism industry, the tourism ministry, it had already collapsed under Shamfa Kojo. And he has now found it since then impossible to raise the dead. And that is what has happened to tourism and the tourism industry in Trinidad and Tobago. Faris Al-Rawi is the follow the money man and the connect the dots man. Last night you heard him. He's going to connect the dots here and connect the dots there. Last night, everything was connecting the dots. He said there was a connection between crime, the economy, legislation, and corruption. I want to tell you something that is not a secret because it is written. It is documented. Trinidad and Tobago is today more corrupt than Saudi Arabia, South Africa, and Jamaica, according to Transparency International. Transactions such as buying of boats, the procurement of planes, the construction of a dry docking facility in La Brea never went through a tendering or proper procurement process. But they're doing business. That is what this government is about. They are doing business. The Rowley government's tenure will come to an end without the Procurement Act that was passed in January 2015 by the People's Partnership and watered down twice by this regime since they came into office through amendments. They will finish their term and go out of office, and they will not proclaim the procurement bill. And look at the questionable transactions that have taken place and continue to take place under this regime. And Faris Al-Rawi, you know, he said that the two most important things are crime and the economy. You know what the murder count is today? 275. These days, you have to check to know, you know, because they don't announce it anymore. You know what is another important thing about crime, not just the number of murders? Another important thing is that Gary Griffith, the Commissioner of Police, says that police cannot fight the criminals effectively in Trinidad and Tobago when the government financing the criminals with contracts. I didn't say so, you know. Is Gary Griffith say so, the Commissioner of Police? So I want to hear what the government ministers have to say about that. The Commissioner of Police say that. In other words, crime can't done in Trinidad and Tobago if politicians financing criminals and giving them wings. Simple matter. And what about the economy? The Prime Minister mentioned the report from Standard & Poor's. Standard & Poor's is an agency like Moody's, which looks at countries all over the world and says basically how they are doing in relation to other countries and in relations they say about themselves, what the government says they are going to do. The Prime Minister mentioned the report from Standard & Poor's. He made as if they downgrade us from BBB plus to BBB. He made as if the downgrade was no big thing and everything is under control. But do you know that local government throughout this country, at least in the areas in which the UNC is the dominant force in the local government. I don't know if it is true for every local government, but I suspect it is. Do you know that they have received no money for their development program? Do you know that the offices of parliamentarians have not been paid for months? And they basically operating on gas, so to speak, and that the landlords for these premises occupied by MPs have not been paid either. I can tell you that from personal experience because I got a call from a landlord. Do you know that the Infrastructure Development Fund was raided last year and development financing was at its lowest levels ever in the history of this country over the last 4 years since the development program came into being, and it came into being in 1986? Do you know that public servants are at pains to manage recurrent expenditure, much less development spending? They don't have any. Do you know that businesses are shutting down every day, that jobs are being lost, that families go hungry, that the middle class is shrinking, that the working class is becoming poor, and the poor desperate? Do you know that it is difficult for many people to purchase the food that they need and the books that their children need? Well, these are the facts of life in Trinidad and Tobago. Do you know that most of the people that they are renting from for government offices in Port-of-Spain have not been paid their rent, some of them from 6, 7, 8, 9 months. And it is just fear on the part of these owners of buildings that they have not said anything publicly because they know how vindictive and cruel this government is. But I am sure that Faris Al-Rawi got his rent. The Prime Minister mentioned Standard and Poor's. So let us take a look at the report, and I will just mention a few things because I don't want to read this thing long. When you think you're ready for me to leave here, just let me know. Okay. The first thing I want to say to you is that the Standard and Poor's document, besides the downgrade, talks about lower than expected energy production, less oil and gas, and economic growth will weaken the government's revenue base. That means to say that we are going to have less production, we're going to have less revenue, and therefore it's going to be very difficult for the government to meet its targets for revenue and much more difficult to meet expenditure needs. Okay? Second one, the stable outlook reflects our expectation that the Trinidad and Tobago's large government financial assets will continue to provide a fiscal and external safeguard that will mitigate economic volatility. Those are big words, but what they mean is that the best thing that Trinidad and Tobago has is the reserves that we have, which has dropped from 11.5 billion to now just over 7 billion, and which at the current rate of depletion will go to approximately $4 billion by the end of 2020. And the second thing that we have is the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. So they are basically Standard and Poor's are saying that those are the things that give us a sense of stability, but everything else, as I will read for you now, is in trouble. Let me tell you what is in trouble. We expect the fiscal deficit will increase over the next 2 years as revenue growth fails to match that of spending. So what they are saying is that the deficits will continue. Economic growth is not materializing. And over the next 2 years, it could lead to lower per capita income levels. You know what that means? It means that the economy is not showing any signs of growth. Remember, Imbert said and talked about turnaround and the growth and all of these things. But more than that, you know what they are saying is that all of our incomes, whatever we're earning, it is dwindling. We are earning less. That is why you find it difficult to put the same amount of food on your table with the same amount of dollars. That is why you find that you cannot meet the challenges of rent with your salary. That is why you find that everything that you are buying seems to be costing more than you expected in the first place. Now, the other thing it says is that what will happen is that this will contribute to persistently larger increases in net general government debt or help boost interest payments above 10% of general government revenues. We could lower the ratings as a result. So what he's saying is that while all of this is going on, Standard and Poor's, is that the debt is increasing. And because there is no growth, and because the level of income is decreasing, revenue, what is happening is that a larger percentage of your revenue is being used to repay the debt. So it's almost like you are being caught in a kind of grind. Then later on, I won't read from the text anymore. You have to trust me that I am taking what I am saying from the text that the people prepared. But I will tell you what are some of the things that they said that we can conclude. They are basically saying that financial policy of the government, the fiscal policy of the government, the economic policy of the government are at odds with monetary policy. In other words, the policy of the government and the policy that the central bank wants to deploy are at variance. They are in conflict. And that is why the Minister of Finance publicly quarrels with the governor of the central bank. He, poor fellow, don't quarrel back. Okay? But the Minister of Finance chastises him in public as he chastises everybody in Trinidad and Tobago who has a different view from the Minister of Finance or the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Hear this one. Stubbornly low economic growth has slowed the recovery of income levels, with average real per capita growth behind that of other countries with similar income levels. Not only are we doing bad in relation to how we used to do, but we are falling behind in the world compared to other countries. You understand that? While we standing in the same place and regressing, other countries are moving forward. So they talk about the gas shortage, and I mentioned that already, but the main point I want to make here about the gas shortage is that they say it will impact negatively on the non-energy sector. That is to say, the growth that you were hoping for outside of energy is not going to happen as the shortage begins to make itself felt in a situation in which it squeezes the energy sector itself and cannot positively impact on the rest of the sectors outside of energy. They talk about the lowest oil production ever in the history of the country, and they say the chances of making that go up are almost nil for the next 2 or 3 years, and that it is likely to go further down. They talk about, they basically say there is no turnaround at all. They mention less than 1% growth in 2018, 0.8, and less than 0.5% in 2019 projected. You know what an economist friend of mine described the economy as? He said it is comatose. It is in a coma. It's like a living dead and it can't move. It on life support, somebody say it in the back there. And what they say again, I won't read it, it's too long, but they talk about the falling income in the country, the falling standard of living, and they talk about our per capita income dropping to $16,458 in 2019. So when I said a few weeks ago that the government was in fact running the country to the ground and pauperizing the country, I was not lying. They say that there is no chance of a balanced budget. They say the debt will continue to grow. It will surpass 30% of GDP by next year and grow to 35% by 2022, according to our estimates. They say Petrotrin was down. They say Petrotrin was given a final BB rating only because they know that if something were to go wrong with Petrotrin, the government will move in to support it. So all of this is based not on Petrotrin's independence, but on the capacity of the government of Trinidad and Tobago to intervene in a crisis that was created by the PNM under Malcolm Jones and that board, and which we have had to live with since then. They talk about the current account balance and the depletion of reserves, and they talk about the numbers not being accurate, so you can't be sure. With the depletion of reserves, what that means is that if you are losing 1.6 billion US every year, and you continue to do that, it's only a matter of time before $7.5 billion become to zero. So it is a real challenge for us in Trinidad and Tobago. What I'm going to close by saying, therefore, is that the economy of Trinidad and Tobago is not well managed at all. It is badly managed by this government. And if we allow them to continue, the longer we allow them to continue, the worse the country is going to be. So what we need to do is to hope for an early election and move them out of government. Our revenue is in trouble, our expenditure is too high, our debt is skyrocketing, and we are getting to a point where we may not be able to repay the debt that we are accruing. That is a very, very bad situation. And what I suspect the PNM is doing is that they are preparing a poison pill for the UNC. I want to warn you about that. They are preparing a poison pill for the UNC with this recklessness that they are proceeding with the finances and the economic management of this country, and the lies that they are telling about how good the economy is going. Anybody in Trinidad and Tobago knows that this place is terrible. We are under pressure. Businesses are collapsing. Jobs are going. People are at their wits' end to make a living. And I want to say to you, the only solution at this point is not economic. That is going to come after. The solution is deeply political. And that means you have to get up, you have to stand up, you have to rise up, you have to join up, and you have to make sure that we build an army of citizens for change in this country that will move Rowley and the PNM out of office. And we will put in place a good government committed to good governance, and a prime minister who has experience and who has done it before and who has created jobs in this country, Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa.